So Manny Pac-Man Pacquiao is of course one of the most famous boxers in the history of the sport. He's the decorated 8 division world champion who everyone and their mother has heard about. But much fewer people have heard of Manny's younger brother Bobby Pacquiao, who is just a year younger than him and had a boxing career of his own. I'm sure everyone knows or can at least make the educated guess that Bobby Pacquiao's boxing career wasn't as successful as Manny Pacquiao's boxing career. But was Bobby a decent pro at least? Did he actually manage to pick up a world title in his career himself, but just couldn't compare to the 12 world titles that his brother won? Or did Bobby even ever challenge for a world title? Or was he actually a journeyman with a losing record like the lesser known older brothers of Chris Eubank were, for example? Well, we'll answer that today in the look back at the boxing career of Bobby Pacquiao. And just to let you know, this one gets interesting as it goes on, so do stick with it. Bobby the Sniper Pacquiao actually had no amateur fights, and he made his professional boxing debut, or just boxing debut all round, back on April 24th of 1997 in his native Philippines at the age of 17. He would win his debut with a round 1 knockout victory over Teddy Gan. So Bobby started out nice and young like his brother Manny, who turned pro at the age of 16 in 1995. Bobby's round 1 knockout win in his debut took place on the same card as Manny Pacquiao's 19th pro fight. Manny defeated Wook Kee Lee by way of a round 1 knockout as well, to move his record to 18-1. So a good night for the Pacquiao brothers there, with 2 first round stoppages. Unfortunately, there is no footage of the Bobby Pacquiao fight to be found on the internet, despite there being footage of his brother's fight that took place on the same card. And the lack of footage will remain a theme for the domestic stage of Bobby Pacquiao's career, so you have to bear with and wait for the fights that there are footage of later on. It's worth the wait, some wild stuff happens in them. So Bobby went to 3-0 with 1 draw in his first 4 professional bouts. All 4 fights were 4-rounders that took place in the Philippines and were fought at bantamweight and super flyweight. His 5th pro fight was his first fight outside of the Philippines, and this was a 10-rounder over in Thailand that he lost on points. And Bobby went back to exclusively fighting in the Philippines for some time after this. 3 fights after his first loss, he suffered his first stoppage loss to Izagani Perez. This fight moved Bobby Pacquiao to a record of 4-3 with 1 draw, so a less than ideal record after 8 bouts. After the Perez loss, Bobby went 6 fights unbeaten with 5 wins and a draw until going on to rematch Perez, and Bobby avenged the loss with a 10-round decision victory over Perez. This one moved Bobby to 10-3-2, so a much better record through 15 fights than it was through 8. Bobby was up at super bantamweight at this point, and he would proceed to fluctuate between super bantamweight and featherweight for the next couple of years. Rematches were a massive theme in Bobby's career when fighting in the Philippines. Between the 2 Izagani Perez fights, he fought a guy called Dodong Sales twice, beating him both times. And the Perez rematch would be followed up by back-to-back fights against Rafi Aladi. Bobby lost to Aladi by majority decision the first time around, then lost to Aladi again by a round 2 knockout in the immediate rematch. Bobby bounced back from those 2 losses with a round 1 KO win over Felipe Longakit. Then moving on to the year 2000, Bobby Pacquiao had his first title fight and his first 12-rounder when he fought for the Philippine Games and Amusements Board Super Bantamweight title against Dino Olivetti. We'll just refer to that title as the Filipino title from here on. Unfortunately, Bobby lost this fight by a 7th round stoppage and failed to pick up that title belt. This fight was on the undercard of Manny Pacquiao's WBC international title defense, in which Bobby's older brother successfully defended that belt with a round 4 stoppage over Arnel Barretillo. So only one Pacquiao brother was successful on that night. Bobby went on a 3-fight winning streak after the loss to Olivetti, including a win over Izagani Perez in a trilogy fight, until Bobby rematched Olivetti to challenge for the Filipino title again, and Bobby lost to Olivetti again, by a majority decision the second time around. This loss in his second Filipino title fight was the start of a 3-fight skid that also included a round 1 KO loss to the 11-0 Jim Rex Jacka and a decision loss to Rafi Aladi in a trilogy fight, so another trilogy there, and that was his 3rd loss to Aladi. Bobby was 14-9 with 2 draws after this, so he wasn't looking like he was exactly going to be a massive star at this juncture. At the point of Bobby Pacquiao's 3rd loss to Rafi Aladi, September 2001, Manny Pacquiao had made his American debut in his most recent fight, defeating Lelo Ledbawa by stoppage for the IBF Bantamweight World title. Manny Pacquiao became a 2-weight world champion that night, and his record grew to 33-2. After those 3 consecutive losses, Bobby bounced back with 3 consecutive wins, the 3rd of which was a 12th round stoppage win over an undefeated opponent that lined him up for another shot at the Filipino title, but up at super featherweight this time around. Bobby faced off against Renato Enal for the vacant strap, and stopped Enal in the 11th round to become the new Filipino champ. So in his 29th fight, Bobby had finally won his first belt. Bobby successfully defended the strap with a round 4 stoppage win over Al Deligüe, then made his second successful title defense with a 12-round unanimous decision victory over Baby Lerona Jr., a name you might recognize if you've looked at Bobby Pacquiao's record in the past. The Lerona win moved Bobby's record up to 20-9-2 and put him on a 6-fight winning streak. But the reason that Baby Lerona's name is intrinsic with Bobby Pacquiao's on the Filipino boxing scene is because remember I said the whole thing about rematches being a common theme here? Well, this fight is the first of what would be a quintology between Bobby Pacquiao and Baby Lerona Jr. Yes, they fought each other 5 times. And we thought it was unheard of that Manny Pacquiao fought one man 4 times in the form of Juan Manuel Marquez. Fighting someone more than thrice is uncommon in modern boxing, well at the high level at least. I guess the one thing that Bobby has over his older brother Manny is that he's had more fights with one single fighter than Manny ever has. Well, funnily enough, Juan Manuel Marquez's younger brother, who is also just a year younger than him, in Rafael Marquez, had fought a guy 4 times himself in Israel Vazquez. R.I.P. Israel Vazquez. So I guess Manny Pacquiao and Juan Manuel Marquez fought each other 4 times because fighting one guy a bunch of times runs in their respective families. Also, Juan Manuel Marquez had actually fought Baby Lerona Jr. before Lerona fought Bobby Pacquiao, and Marquez stopped Lerona in 2. Back on track. The Filipino champ Bobby Pacquiao would have an immediate rematch with Baby Lerona Jr. 4 months later in a 10-round non-title bout on the undercard of Manny Pacquiao's featherweight debut against Zerikzan Yesh Magambetov, and Lerona avenged the loss to Bobby Pacquiao with a 7th round stoppage win. So Baby Lerona and Bobby Pacquiao were 1-1 with each other, but Bobby was still the champ as this was a non-title bout. However, as much as we've been devoid of footage up until this point of Bobby Pacquiao's career, well, we still are amidst this Baby Lerona saga, but this loss to Lerona in the rematch was Bobby Pacquiao's 5th stoppage loss, and I found this old article on a Filipino news outlet that tells us that Baby Lerona stopped Bobby Pacquiao with body shots. And this article also teaches us that Bobby's vulnerability to the body had been the cause for his other stoppage losses at that point in his career. So that's an interesting one there because it's well known that in Manny Pacquiao's second career loss in 1999, he was stopped to the body, and this set him off to stringently condition his core to where this would never happen again. So I guess Bobby didn't have the same drive that Manny did, unfortunately. The rubber match between Bobby Pacquiao and Baby Lerona was taking place just 2 months later, and this was a scheduled 12-rounder for Bobby's Filipino title this time around. And Bobby won by a 12-round unanimous decision to go 2-1 over Lerona in the trilogy and make his 3rd successful Filipino title defense. We have a written piece here on BoxRec that tells us that Bobby was cut on his left eyelid from an accidental head clash in the 7th, but he fought on and he fended off Lerona's body assault this time around and outpointed him for the win. After winning the trilogy, Bobby fought back-to-back non-title fights and won them both, then made his 4th title defense in a rematch against Renato Enal, the very man who he won the vacant belt against, and he knocked out Enal in the 6th round to remain the champ. Then title defense number 5 would be fight 4 against Baby Lerona Jr. And this time around, as written on screen, Bobby would be cut again from an accidental head clash, this time above the right eyebrow, and the fight would be stopped in the 2nd round and declared a technical draw. And this was technically a successful title defense for Bobby Pacquiao that left him 2-1-1 with Baby Lerona Jr. The unsatisfactory end would warrant an immediate rematch 4 months later, which was fight number 5 between the two. We have here on BoxRec that Bobby Pacquiao suffered a cut from an accidental head clash again in fight 5, early on in the fight. Either these two guys' styles clashed horribly, or Lerona is getting away with a bit of dirty work in these fights. But Pacquiao would box on again and win a fairly comfortable decision by the looks of things. I have read on another article that it was a convincing win from Bobby. Oh, and by the way, that was title defense number 6 of that Filipino super featherweight strap. Now with a record of 25, 10 and 3 in November 2004, Bobby Pacquiao would vacate the Filipino title and finally make his US debut in an 8-rounder against a journeyman called Oscar Villa. This wasn't on a big card though, like the cards his brother Manny started headlining in the States at that point, but it was on the undercard of an up-and-coming Nonito Donaire who was in an 8-rounder himself. Bobby Pacquiao defeated Villa by a unanimous decision in his US debut, dropping Villa in the 5th round. Speaking of his brother Manny, Bobby was supposed to be straight back to the Philippines after his US debut in November to fight Dexter Delada on the undercard of Manny Pacquiao versus Fashan 3K Battery in December, but this fight with Delada fell through. So after the US debut, Bobby would be back in Thailand for his next outing in February 2005, fighting there for the first time since his 5th pro fight and first loss back in 1997. And he was up against former Manny Pacquiao opponent Faprokor Barakiat Jim in a fight for the IBF Pan-Pacific featherweight title. This was Bobby's first fight down at featherweight in 3.5 years. Manny stopped Rakiat Jim in round 1 back in 2002, so could Bobby emulate his older brother's performance? Unfortunately not, as Bobby Pacquiao would be stopped by Rakiat Jim in round 9 to suffer his 6th career stoppage loss. After the loss over in Thailand, Bobby Pacquiao would be straight back to the States again in June of 2005, in a big fight this time around. He was main eventing an ESPN Friday Night Fight show in a 12-rounder for the WBC America's Super Featherweight title against the defending champion Carlos Navarro in California. Americans were now getting to see the 25-year-old younger brother of Manny Pacquiao on their TV screens, after Manny had become a familiar name in North America with his fights against Marco Antonio Barrera, Juan Manuel Marquez and Eric Morales. Bobby's opponent Carlos Navarro was 26-3-1, defending his America's title against the 26-11-3 Bobby Pacquiao. So I'll make the educated guess that Navarro was the favourite here. Carlos Navarro also had a famous boxing brother, much like Bobby by the way. Carlos was the older brother of Jose Navarro, and the younger Jose was the higher profile of the two Navarro bros. So this was a fight between two less famous boxing brothers here. Before we get into the fight now, here's what commentator Joe Tessitore had to say as the fight was starting.
Those back in the Philippines say that Bobby actually may have been the better boxer, but the physical gifts and the tools, the speed, the athleticism, the heart, the courage that Manny has, I mean, he's just world class when it comes to that.
So in the first round, Bobby Pacquiao seems to have some type of issue with his boots that prevent him from setting his feet and moving around properly, which was really costing him in there. But he does manage to land a few good body shots and jabs in what was a competitive opening round. In round 2, Carlos Navarro boxes well and makes good use of his jab and straight left hand to clearly outland a still unsteady looking Bobby Pacquiao. A solution for Bobby's slippery boots come into play between the 2nd and 3rd round as his corner wrapped the sticky tape meant for the gloves around his boots. Bizarre scenes for Bobby's first fight on the big stage here. Pacquiao tries to get a bit of momentum going with some big swings in the 3rd round, but the situation with his boots is still the overbearing factor of the fight. Carlos Navarro is clearly the more precise with his punches here in this round as it goes on, so Navarro wins that one too. More tape applied to Bobby's boot after the 3rd. Round 4 is a lot more competitive with the two men going back and forth with shots, and Bobby Pacquiao looks to have just gotten the better of the 4th as these heated exchanges suited him a bit more. Going into round 5, the situation with Bobby's boots no longer seems to be an issue, and Bobby is very active and persistent with the jab in this round, rocking the head back of Navarro. Pacquiao does get caught with a few good shots in the process, but he outworked Navarro in the 5th to take that round. In round 6, the two men were going back and forth again, both landing clean. Bobby's shots were marking up the face of Navarro more and swelling Navarro's eye up, and in this round, Navarro took a knee from a body blow that was ruled low by the ref due to Carlos's complaint, and the ref took a point from Bobby Pacquiao for the apparent low blow. Bobby Pacquiao would keep digging to the body however, and he outworked Navarro for the remainder of the round. After the round ended now, a replay would show that the punch that Navarro went down from was a clean body shot by Pacquiao, so Pacquiao was robbed of a knockdown and of a point there. Well, he was robbed of 2 points really. So at the halfway stage of the fight, it was 3 rounds apiece, but Navarro was ahead due to the point deduction. Well, I can't find the official cards anywhere, but that does seem to be the case. So we had the weird situation with Bobby's boots earlier in the fight, then we had the controversial point deduction in the 6th as a result of poor refereeing, but things got much weirder in round 7. So Bobby Pacquiao came out swinging and put it on Navarro. A lot of these shots to the head this time. Bobby landed a couple of big shots and sort of pushed the head down of a low ducking Carlos Navarro, so that one was ruled a slip. But Navarro would not get straight back up, so referee John Shirley began to count as if it was a knockdown, but it was just to urge Navarro to get back up.
He is not getting up. He wants a count.
You can see more than swelling. You can see the breaking down, the dismantling.
Navarro got back up and the action resumed. A big exchange heated up, which Pacquiao got the better of again, and Navarro ducked down low and got pushed down again, and ate a rather light shot to the head from Pacquiao when he was already down. John Shirley did not rule this a knockdown, but he was telling Navarro that he got fouled, but was also telling him to get up.
He hit you when you were down.
He hit you when he was down, he says. So he's giving him time.
Get up. Get up. He hit you when you were down. He hit you when you were down. Get up.
Weird one, because Carlos Navarro is clearly trying to buy time there, but if the ref wants to rule it a foul and not a knockdown, then he's got to give Navarro time. After that debacle, Bobby Pacquiao would continue to come at Carlos Navarro full force, and quickly here, the ref tells Carlos to stop holding, but he refers to him by his younger brother's name, Jose. And not long after, Carlos Navarro takes a knee as a result of a Pacquiao onslaught.
Strong but wide punches. He takes a knee for the third time in this round.
No matter what his technique and what his ability to counter in between, it doesn't matter because he's taking a counter.
That's unbelievable. Carlos Navarro just made a mockery of the sport and just left the sport right there. He counted along with the referee to his own defeat. He should seriously think about whether or not he wants to be a professional any longer. This is a man that speaks with such resentment at times when discussing his own career, his lack of dedication, talking about the fact that there was almost a jealousy and resentment of his brother's success and he felt left out, so he got involved again. On the other side, you saw a brother of a famous fighter who showed heart. Whoever came adversity, he was slipping and sliding without traction for 2 rounds, but yet he rose to the occasion and came through like a real pro and earned by far the best win of his career.
Bizarre scenes there. I do love a weird, obscure old fight like that. And it was interesting to hear the play-by-play commentator Joe Tessitore contrast the attitudes of the two less famous boxing brothers who are fighting each other here. But I don't think the commentary team picked up on referee John Shirley calling Carlos Jose in there, so maybe that's what caused Carlos to fully snap and deteriorate mentally, being referred to by the name of his little brother. So that was a great performance from our guy Bobby Pacquiao in his second fight on US soil there, and his first main event stateside. Overcame some strange circumstances to defeat the hometown fighter who had the much more winning record. Weird fight against a guy who clearly wasn't mentally all there, but let that not overshadow the fact that the little brother of Manny Pacquiao, who lost all those fights in the Philippines, managed to make a big impact in his first big fight in the States. Bobby was the new WBC Continental America Super Featherweight champ, which got him ranked at number 14 in the WBC Super Featherweight World Rankings. So as a top 15 fighter, Bobby was then eligible for a world title fight. A few months after the Navarro fight, in October 2005, Bobby Pacquiao would attempt to keep that stateside momentum up as he faced off against former IBF World Super Featherweight champ Carlos Hernandez in the Thomas & Mack Center in Vegas. This was on the undercard of Jose Luis Castillo vs Diego Corrales 2 on Showtime, and Bobby had his brother Manny and his coach Freddie Roach by his side here. This fight was a 10-rounder, and Bobby's WBC Continental Americas title was not on the line here. Good opening round from Bobby Pacquiao as he lands combinations and moves around well. Hernandez's pressure does pay off as he lands some shots later on in the round, but it was definitely a Pacquiao round. Pacquiao still active with the combinations in round 2, but he's moving around less and getting stuck in more, so the two men are going back and forth more here. Bobby's finding a home with that lead right uppercut a good bit here, and Pacquiao actually drops the former world champ with a hard left hand right at the end of the round. Exciting affair in the early going, and Bobby had given himself a nice lead with that 2-point round. Round 3 is another very exciting one. Bobby Pacquiao starts at a great pace again, throwing punches and bunches and bloodying up Hernandez's nose. But halfway through the round, Hernandez starts to get off with more shots of his own, and he actually manages to rock Pacquiao with a hard right hand to have him shaken. And Hernandez was then putting it on Bobby for the rest of that round to take that round. Thrilling stuff here. Round 4, the two men are getting stuck in again, but that Hispanic style high guard pressure fighting from Hernandez is paying off here as he starts to back Bobby up more and get through with more shots as the round goes on. Hernandez looks a stronger fighter here, and he took that 4th round too. Round 5 is a closer one. Hernandez not putting it on Pacquiao as much here, and Pacquiao was boxing around fairly well, so round 5 was probably a Pacquiao round, which had him ahead at the halfway point of the fight. Coach Freddie Roach liked that round more from Bobby than the last 2 rounds before it, and he wanted to see more of that boxing and moving from Bobby. Round 6 is still competitive in there with both men landing, but Hernandez has sort of lost that momentum that he had in the 3rd and 4th rounds, and Bobby Pacquiao was boxing well here. Carlos Hernandez always seems to end the round strong and explosive though, mind you, probably to try and nick the round, but whether or not the very late onslaughts are enough to win him the round is debatable. Manny Pacquiao is seen shouting advice to his little bro before the 7th round. Round 7, both men warned about the use of the head in this scrappy but exciting affair. Bobby Pacquiao still active with the combos, boxing well still, but Hernandez gets through of more of those tight inside shots about halfway through the round to swing the momentum in his favour and have Bobby Pacquiao a bit shaken. Pacquiao's still tough and gritty in there, throwing some swings back, but Hernandez continues to get the better of most of the inside work with shots to the head and body. So that looked like a Carlos Hernandez round there. Round 8 is still a competitive and gritty affair, but both men have slowed down a bit. This time Hernandez's late work in the round was probably enough to win him the round. So it was looking like a fairly close fight overall, but Bobby's 10-8 round in the second might have had him just in the lead, depending on what you like here. Round 9 is another gritty back and forth round. Pacquiao is getting off here and there, but Hernandez looks the stronger fighter and is very effective with those tight shots in close, so it's probably another Hernandez round by the looks of it. And the 10th and final round, it's a tight one and it's back and forth in there. Not too dissimilar to the previous 2 rounds, but probably a bit of a better Pacquiao round than the 8th and 9th rounds were for him. So the fight did ultimately go the distance, and the verdict was up in the air. It was looking like it could go either way. Hernandez probably did the better work all round as the fight went on, but as long as you give Bobby 5 rounds, then he wins it off of the knockdown that he scored in round 2. Now here's what the official cards read.
After 10 rounds of action, we have a split decision. Here are the score totals. Judge at ringside, Robert Royal scores the bout 97-92 in favor of Carlos Hernandez. Judge at ringside, Chuck Joppa scores the bout 95-94 in favor of Bobby Pacquiao. Judge at ringside, Dwayne Ford scores the bout 95-93 in favor of the winner, Bobby Pacquiao.
What a win for Bobby Pacquiao. Hernandez has been beaten.
So yes, a split decision with very different scorecards. One judge had it 8 rounds to 2 to Hernandez with the 1 point off from the knockdown that he conceded. One had it 5 apiece with Bobby Pacquiao winning it off of the knockdown, and the other judge gave Bobby 6 of the 10 rounds. So good win for Bobby Pacquiao there over a former top level world champion. Debatable win on the cards for sure, but it was a good performance from Pacquiao in a very tough and entertaining fight. Just edged it on the cards, but 5 rounds to Bobby is fair. You'd have to be lenient to Bobby there, but I wouldn't say it was a robbery that he won there, as I think he quite clearly won 4 of the rounds, so you've just got to edge 1 round to him outside of those 4. You could also say that this was a bit of a worn out version of Carlos Hernandez, 9 years older than Bobby and had taken 5 losses at that point. But Hernandez was only just over a year removed from being a world champion, and Bobby had 11 losses of his own back in the Philippines, remember? So that was the 3rd fight in the US for Bobby Pacquiao, and the 2nd big one. And yeah, it was a decent showcase and a fun fight against a former world champ to get himself on a 2-fight win streak and move him to a record of 3-0 in the States. It was a 10-round non-title affair, so it wouldn't have done much for his rankings, I don't think, but he still held that America's title. And now at least anyone watching that Corrales vs Castillo 2 card would know that Manny Pacquiao's little brother ain't no bum. The next fight for Bobby the Sniper Pacquiao in June of 2006 would be a scheduled 12-round defense of the WBC Continental title, and it would be his 2nd fight in a row against a former world champ. This time out, Bobby Pacquiao was facing off against former WBC featherweight champ Kevin Kelley in Madison Square Gardens on the undercard of Miguel Cotto vs Paulie Malignaggi. In this case, it is kind of fair to say that Kevin Kelley was past his best, as he was over 11 years removed from holding a legit world title, and since losing that belt in 1995, he had been stopped 3 times over the years, by Nassim Hamed, Eric Morales and Marco Antonio Barrera. But that is some serious competition, mind you. Kevin Kelley had 6 losses, 4 of which are by stoppage going into his bout with Bobby Pacquiao, but he was on a 4-fight win streak going into the fight. And I know it's not quite the same, but Bobby Pacquiao had been stopped 6 times in his 11 losses and was only on a 2-fight win streak himself after last being stopped. So let's get into the action in this super featherweight affair. So the first round was a cagey opener with the 2 southpaws fighting at a controlled pace, both trying to establish their jab. Nothing much landed by either man until Kelley just got through the guard of Bobby Pacquiao with a couple jabs and left hands later in the round. Round 2 is a bit of a messy one in the early going with some tussling on the inside. Later in the round the 2 men trade body shots, then Pacquiao lands one that is deemed low. They go back to trading to the body. Pacquiao is getting the better of things here, but he does land one very low this time, on Kevin Kelley's leg in fact, so he's warned by referee Steve Willis again. Pacquiao then continues to outland Kelley for the rest of that round. 1 round apiece after 2, I'd say. Bobby Pacquiao was active with the combinations, completely outlanding Kelley for the first minute plus of the 3rd round, but then Kelley lands a big left uppercut to stop Bobby in his tracks a bit. Then the 2 men proceed to trade punches at a decent pace as the round goes on. Then right at the end of the round, Bobby sits Kevin Kelley down with a well-timed signature Pacquiao left hand. Kevin Kelley had been sniped, and he had conceded a 10-8 round. But could Kelley recover before the 4th round would commence? Round 4, Bobby Pacquiao starts out hot and rushes a fairly dishevelled looking Kevin Kelley to pick up from the knockdown just a minute prior. Bobby has him backed up to the ropes and rips in shots to the head and body. Kelley is able to land a few clean shots back as Bobby is stood right in front of him. The two men continue trading to the body when Kelley went back to centre ring. Then boom, Pacquiao dropped Kevin Kelley with one of those body blows and Kelley was out for the count. Bobby Pacquiao had defeated the former world champ by a round 4 stoppage. It was a peach of a blow to the ribs that got Kelley out of there. Now that was not a blow, if you dig what I'm saying. So a big win for Bobby Pacquiao there to remain the WBC Continental America's Super Featherweight Champion. That was 4 wins in 4 in the States for him, and 3 pretty big wins in a row. He was being trained by Manny Pacquiao's team, he had 2 wins in a row over former world champs, and it was looking like Manny Pacquiao's little bro could make somewhat of an impact on the world stage here. Kelley was ranked at number 6 in the WBC Super Featherweight rankings going into this fight, so this Continental title defence would have done good for our guy Bobby's WBC rankings. And as for Kevin Kelley being past his best at this point, nobody could deny that fact of course, but he wasn't completely past it. Because remember the same Carlos Hernandez who fought to a split decision against Bobby Pacquiao and arguably should have got the nod over Bobby? Well, in Kevin Kelley's very next fight after losing to Bobby, just 3.5 months after that stoppage loss, he turned around and defeated Carlos Hernandez by unanimous decision, dropping Hernandez in the process. So Bobby Pacquiao, Carlos Hernandez and Kevin Kelley had a little round robin there, with Bobby Pacquiao coming out on top with 2 wins, one of which are by stoppage. Bobby's brother Manny was also more famously involved in a cheeky round robin or 2 in and around that time period himself as well. So fast forward to November of 2006, next up for Bobby Pacquiao was title defence number 2 of the WBC Continental America Super Featherweight title against Hector Velazquez, a fight main event in a card at the Hard Rock Hotel and Casino. Well, this fight was meant to be title defence number 2, but Bobby Pacquiao came in 3 pounds over the 130 pound super featherweight limit, so he actually lost that regional belt on the scales. But the fight went ahead, and the belt was only on the line for Velazquez here. Just like that, Bobby was no longer Continental Champion, and his reign ended having made 1 successful title defence. Now both Bobby Pacquiao and Hector Velazquez were riding 3 fight winning streaks going into this affair, with Bobby Pacquiao's last defeat being that stoppage loss in Thailand back in February 05, and Hector Velazquez's last defeat was a stoppage loss back in September 05, to none other than Manny Pacquiao. So seeing as Bobby is facing a former opponent of his brothers here, let's take a look at where Manny Pacquiao was at this point in time before we look at Bobby Pacquiao vs Hector Velazquez. So last time we checked in on Manny Pacquiao was 2001, 5 years before this point, and he was a 2-weight world champion. And fast forward to 2006 now, he was a 3-weight world champion, having picked up the Ring Magazine featherweight title in 03. That was the 1 world title he held since that IBF Super Bantamweight title that he won back in 01. But at this point in November 06, he was the WBC International Super Featherweight champion. So funnily enough, Manny Pacquiao and Bobby Pacquiao both held a WBC contender belt at the same time in the same weight class. Well, Bobby's was a regional belt and Manny's was probably more likely to get him a shot at the full world title, but the two brothers would have been in the same ranking system, working towards the same world title belt. But not anymore of course, as Bobby lost his continental belt on the scales ahead of this fight. Manny Pacquiao won that WBC international title in a vacant title fight in his victory over Hector Velazquez back in September 05 funnily enough. He has since made 2 defences of his belt, against Eric Morales in a rematch and against Oscar Larios. And defence number 3 of that international belt was a trilogy fight against Eric Morales, which was set to take place just 2 days after this fight between Bobby Pacquiao and Hector Velazquez. And apparently Freddie Roach was mainly occupied with Manny Pacquiao's training camp at this time, and Bobby Pacquiao didn't get as much attention in his camp, and that's why he missed weight for this Velazquez fight. So yeah, I thought I'd just use the common opponents to stop and take a look at how the Pacquiao brothers compared to each other at that point in time. Obviously Manny was the more decorated Pacquiao brother, a former 3-weight world champion at that point, and everyone knew he was the better brother of course. But at that point, they were both pretty much in the same position, as super featherweight contenders, as Manny wasn't an actual world champion at that point in time. So back on track now, Bobby Pacquiao vs Hector Velazquez. The Continental belt was only on the line for Velazquez. And one last thing before we get into the fight, both Bobby Pacquiao and Hector Velazquez had 11 losses on their record going into this fight, so the winner was to avoid having a dozen L's. Round 1 is a close back and forth round. Bobby Pacquiao is active with the body shots here but is warned about them straying low at one point. Round 2 is still nice and back and forth. Both men are warned for dirty work in the clinch. Then both men continued to trade decent shots, and Pacquiao was told by referee Kenny Bayless to keep his punches up again. Round 3, Pacquiao drops Velazquez early in the round with what appears to be a leaping lead right uppercut. Velazquez is protesting something, but Kenny Bayless counts the knockdown. The action continues. Bobby Pacquiao gets a hard warning for the punches straying low.
Velazquez's camp was talking about today.
Hard warning.
Pacquiao just keeps ripping to the body afterwards, and Bayless looks like he wants to step in but perhaps isn't in position to see if the shots are low or not. Then boom, Velazquez rocks Bobby with a right hand and has the crowd roaring. Pacquiao is still swinging back though. Then Pacquiao gets deducted a point for going low again just after being rocked.
And this is going to negate the making a point. Look at that. Remember, Velazquez went down. This changes how you score the round. Absolutely.
All right, here we go. Timing in.
Wild round here. The two men continue to go back and forth for the rest of the round, and Bobby just gets the better of things. So yeah, very eventful third round there in what would have been a 9-8 round for our guy Bobby. By the way, a replay does show that Bobby Pacquiao's head collided with Velazquez's head when he knocked him down, but the knockdown was counted nonetheless. Round 4 is another decent back and forth round, but still a lot of messy stuff that's requiring the ref to get involved. Round 5 now, take a look what happens early in the round here.
The idea of a jab. Oh, another low blow. Wow. Another point for Velazquez.
5 seconds.
5 seconds? No, 5 minutes. Kenny Bayless means 5 minutes. I hope. The rule is 5 minutes. Yes, 5 seconds. Get up.
Point.
Another point.
1 point.
Wow.
1 point.
And he's one low blow away from losing on a DQ.
Keep him up. Again, disqualification. Understand? All right. Over here.
All right, well, we're going to take a look at it. All right, and here it comes in, and boom, there's no doubt about that one. That is way low. Yep.
Okay.
So a second point deduction for a low blow there. I suppose Bobby Pacquiao is a bit of a dirty fighter then. The affair remains scrappy and competitive for the rest of the round after the break. Also, by the way, I'm pretty sure that the clock actually wasn't paused for Hector Velazquez's minute plus break after the low blow. So basically that round was less than 2 minutes long in actuality. So going into round 6, not even halfway through the fight yet, Bobby Pacquiao was on thin ice and was due to be disqualified if he went low again. Round 6 still back and forth but still very scrappy. Going into the 7th there was visible swelling above Bobby's eye that was from head clashes, and the head clashing continued. This remains to be a fight that the referee is very involved with, and there's not much in the way of clean action at this point. Both men seem a bit tired, which is why they are meeting in the clinch a lot. After the 7th, a replay is shown of one of the head clashes that may have caused a swelling on Bobby's head. These sort of things do happen in Orthodox versus Southpaw affairs. Round 8 and 9 are back and forth rounds with Velazquez landing the more telling shots. Bobby Pacquiao lands one below the belt on the blind side of the referee Kenny Bayless in the 9th. Pacquiao then lands a borderline shot later in the round, and look what happens.
Oh boy, now what does he do? Oh, Velazquez lost his composure.
This fight is a mess, but it's kind of funny. Upon replay, you could actually call that shot from Pacquiao low to be honest, but I don't think Bayless wanted to disqualify him at this point. Round 10, Bobby goes low again and is warned again. Yeah, it really does seem like Bayless just doesn't want to end this fight with a DQ, which is fair enough. Can I just stop now to say that you could criticise Bayless' performance to this point a bit in regards to breaking clinches too quick and not letting them fight it out. But with the head clashes and the low blows, especially the latter, this has been a nightmare fight to referee for him. I totally understand his plight here in having to acknowledge the low blows but not wanting to stop the fight. Bobby Pacquiao just couldn't help himself here, man. The action continued on. Bobby goes borderline again. This has become the story of the fight unfortunately, and both men trade some decent straight punches as the round goes on. Round 11 there's some good action from the start with both men trading power shots, and it continues on until later in the round. Still messy though, to the point where Bobby Pacquiao actually takes Velazquez down later in the round. And right after the action resumes after that incident,
I won't call him the late Reggie White, but my guess is he's done that before.
That's it.
Left him no choice. But Pacquiao's trying to say hit him on the belt.
That's it.
And unless you wear your belt at your knees, you got to be kidding me.
The fight is over. Shoots on the low blow.
And this is, only 2 rounds overdue anyway.
Yes, sir.
Kenny Bayless, I give him credit because he tried like heck to keep this thing going. Yes, he did. It was a good, close fight, but he was left absolutely no choice. By the same token, however, the rule is the rule. All right, let's take a look at it. I mean, wow, there's nothing up for debate here.
Okay.
Nah. Oh, man, was that close.
And Pacquiao was trying to argue that it was on the belt.
Oh my gosh, that was under the protector.
It was on the low.
Wow.
Well, yeah, that's all she wrote. Bobby Pacquiao was disqualified. For those of you who didn't know how this fight ended before watching this video, I'm sure it was pretty obvious that was going to happen, right? Do let me know in the comments. Hector Velazquez was the winner. He lost to Manny Pacquiao in the past, but he avenged that loss with a win over Manny's little brother. A DQ win at that, but it was a very close and competitive affair that he was arguably getting the better of, and that the dirty stuff unfortunately had an overbearing factor of. Both were messy with the heads and the clinching and stuff, but Bobby just couldn't help himself with the low blows, and he was warned many times, so he did deserve to be DQ'd in all fairness. So Hector Velazquez was the rightful victor, no doubt. Bobby's post-fight interview after being disqualified here is very memed, as some of you may be aware. It's actually what Bobby Pacquiao happens to be most famous for, so let me play it.
Bobby, you were disqualified for repeated low blows. Were you upset with the referee? Did you think that he was wrong?
No, I'm not a blow, blow. It's a good punch. You know, you watch the replay.
Let's take a look at the replays here. Here's round 9.
No, it's not a blow, man. Oh,
The last round.
And here's the final punch of the fight. Oh no, I'm sorry. That's when he said one more time and I'll disqualify you. Here it is. Do you think that's not a low blow?
Here, it's not here. It's here.
Well, Bobby Pacquiao indicating that the punch was a little bit higher. It actually looked like it hit him underneath the cup.
It's not a blow, blow.
So you feel like you weren't treated fairly here tonight?
Yeah, I feel good. But the decision is not.
Yeah, that's what he feels. He feels like he didn't see the hugging and the thing that Velazquez were doing, and he feels like it wasn't the right decision.
Let's take a look at that one more time. I want you to take a look at that. That was it right there, the punch that ended the fight. And you don't think that was a low blow?
Oh, it's 100%, not low blow.
All righty, well, you heard it from Bobby Pacquiao. Doesn't think it was a low blow, but he is a loser tonight by disqualification.
So yeah, you heard it. Bobby Pacquiao was not a blow. So after going 4-0 in America, he took his first L in fight number 5. It all went wrong before the fight anyway, with him coming in overweight and losing his belt on the scales. And in the fight, it was a messy one with a lot of low blowing and leading in with the head from early. With the questionable decision he won over Carlos Hernandez, and the fact that he strayed low a couple times against Kevin Kelley, maybe this loss to Velazquez was bound to happen. This was his 4th big televised fight in America, and now 2 out of the 4 of them saw absolutely bizarre scenes. Remember that Carlos Navarro fight with the stuff with Bobby's boot being all slippery, and then Carlos Navarro crashing out and quitting later on? 2 completely separate wild situations in one fight. And then with this Velazquez fight, there was the whole low blow situation that led to the fight's end, along with a couple of other wild moments. So this loss to Velazquez was loss number 12 for Bobby Pacquiao overall. All the other 11 losses took place in Asia, but now he had lost in front of the American audience. Now, his fight with Hector Velazquez was on a Wednesday, and as aforementioned, Manny Pacquiao would have his trilogy fight with Erik Morales just 2 days later, on the Friday. And Manny Pacquiao stopped Erik Morales in round 3 in that fight to win the trilogy and stop Morales for the 2nd time. Manny was on top of the world then, so at least it wasn't a bad week for both Pacquiao brothers, eh? Remember, Bobby Pacquiao was only 27 years old at this point, so there was room to bounce back from the DQ loss to Velazquez and get back on track after losing that Continental title. He would be back in the ring 7 months after the Velazquez loss, June of 2007 that is, and he was fighting Humberto Soto in a scheduled 10-rounder on the undercard of Miguel Cotto vs Zab Judah at Madison Square Gardens. So Bobby was featuring on a Miguel Cotto MSG card again like he was for the Kevin Kelley fight. Humberto Soto was coming into the fight with a record of 40 wins, 5 losses and 2 draws. He was a former WBC interim featherweight champion and was on a 4-fight knockout streak and a 19-fight unbeaten streak since his loss to Kevin Kelley of all people back in 2002. This bout between Pacquiao and Soto was a super featherweight bout with both men officially weighing 131, 1 pound over the super featherweight limit. And this was despite Bobby claiming that he was going to move up a weight class after missing weight by 3 pounds for the Velazquez fight. So anyway, let's get into the action. Slow start in the early going, Pacquiao goes low with runner ready and Soto lets the ref know. We can tell that boxing smart is on the agenda here for Soto in this first round. At the end of the round, Soto lands a clubbing blow that catches Pacquiao off balance and Pacquiao falls. but the knockdown is counted, so round 1 is actually a 2-point round for Soto. The replay does show that it wasn't a clean knockdown at all, and of course Bobby wasn't hurt at all. The shot literally landed on the top of the back. More weirdness in a Bobby Pacquiao fight here. Second round is fought at a very good pace. Soto is landing good shots to the head and body. Bobby is firing back at a good rate, but the better punches definitely came from Soto throughout the round. Now round 3, Pacquiao is playing it a lot safer so he doesn't get caught as much as he did in the last round, and is working well in terms of not getting hit. But this caginess, darting out of range and refraining from exchanges means that he's not landing too much himself. So towards the end of the round, he does get in and engage with a little trade-off of Soto, and what do you know, Soto comes out the way better in the exchange to nick the round. So Pacquiao would have been down 30-26 at this point and had a big deficit to come back from after 3 rounds. Humberto Soto is getting the better of the 4th round as well, and the ref stops the action for a cut above Bobby's eye that is bleeding into the eye. He gets it wiped and the action goes on. Shortly after the action resumes, Pacquiao lands a huge right hook that rocks Soto. Soto comes back firing and the exchanges begin. Bobby Pacquiao is the one who probably just gets the better of that trading on the inside this time around. When the round ends, we can see that Bobby is bleeding badly, so maybe he wanted to try and knock Soto out before the bleeding got worse. Round 5 is a slower round. The two men do trade some shots, but the shots from Soto are worsening Bobby Pacquiao's bleeding. The bleeding has become the main story of this fight. And on that note, in Bobby Pacquiao's last fight against Velazquez, the low blows were the main story of that one. Pacquiao kept digging to the body and straying low with the shots after being warned. But remember, in this fight against Soto, Pacquiao went low in round 1, which was acknowledged by Soto, we looked to the referee, and since that first round, Pacquiao hasn't gone to the body anywhere near as much as we usually see. Is he discouraged from going to the body as he can't keep the punches up? Or is he headhunting and going for a quick KO as his cut is getting worse? Or a bit of both? Round 6, Soto outboxes and clearly outlands Pacquiao as Pacquiao's cut gets worse and he begins to look desperate. So halfway through the fight, stuff isn't going well for Bobby Pacquiao at all. Round 7, the cut is still horrible and Pacquiao looks hopeless in front of a Soto who is picking his punches well and still outboxing him. Humberto Soto then stuns Pacquiao with a straight right hand, then lands a devastating left hook to the body, and Pacquiao sinks to his knees and ultimately stays down for the count. It was a round 7 stoppage victory for Humberto Soto, and it was Bobby Pacquiao's first stoppage loss in front of the worldwide audience. Pacquiao had lost 2 fights in a row, and his record stood at 29, 13 and 3 after that result. The cut was an unfortunate circumstance and definitely made a difference because it was impeding his vision, but I'm pretty sure it was caused by a punch, and Soto was looking the way better boxer before the cut opened up anyway. So Bobby Pacquiao was most likely on his way to a loss either way, and he had some real bouncing back to do after this one. Granted, Soto was a solid fighter who was on a great run at that point, and the loss didn't go on to age too badly at all either, as Soto went on to become a 2-weight world champion in the following years after beating Bobby Pacquiao, a reigning and defending WBC champ at featherweight and at lightweight, and he continued to fight at a high level for 12 long years after beating Bobby Pacquiao, so no real shame in the loss. Moving on to November 2007 now, Bobby Pacquiao would be fighting on a much smaller show against the rather obscure Fernando Trejo in a 10-round bout in California that appears to be at a catchweight, as Pacquiao weighed 134 and Trejo weighed in at 133. This one was definitely a step down from Bobby's last 5 fights. The Pacquiao name got Bobby on big shows in America, but the 3 consecutive wins from his part did keep him on that stage, to be fair. But after 2 consecutive losses, he was relegated to a lower profile fight on the undercard of a Carlos Baldomir fight. And this was a Carlos Baldomir comeback fight, by the way, because he was also on a 2-fight skid and looking to bounce back. So could Bobby Pacquiao get back on the win column against Trejo here? Before we get into the fight quickly, we can see here that Bobby does not have Manny Pacquiao's coach Freddie Roach by his side for this one, but he has Eric Brown as his coach, who was an assistant of Freddie Roach. So Bobby would have still been training in Roach's wildcard gym. In round 1, both men were boxing smart and being careful with the shots that they threw. Round 2, the action picked up more. Both men threw and landed some decent power shots and got the crowd into it. It would appear that Trejo picked up both of the first 2 rounds though. Then to start round 3, Trejo went on the front foot and was backing Bobby Pacquiao up, landing some big punches that seemed to bother Pacquiao. Trejo stayed on him, but Pacquiao started to land some big shots back as the round went on. Some good shots to the body from him as well. So through 3 rounds, this was a fairly competitive affair that Trejo looked to be winning. In round 4 now, Pacquiao was backing Trejo up and landed a couple of shots, and then Trejo went down holding his arm in pain. The ref began to count as Trejo went down, and Trejo ultimately opted not to continue. So it would appear upon replay that Trejo would not continue as he hurt his left arm in blocking a Pacquiao right hook, and it was later revealed that Trejo had separated his shoulder in that moment, as per BoxRec. So a round 4 TKO victory for Bobby Pacquiao here. It was against an unknown opponent who was very competitive with him and arguably 3 rounds up over Bobby going into the 4th, and then that very unknown opponent had to quit due to a separated shoulder. It was a punch from Bobby Pacquiao that caused the injury, but pragmatically speaking, this was a fluke win. But regardless of the circumstances, Bobby Pacquiao was back on a win. Let's see if he could keep the momentum up. Bobby Pacquiao was on a better stage in his next outing in March of 2008, as he was main eventing in the Hard Rock Casino again, this time in a scheduled 10-rounder against the 21-0 Urbano Antillon, who was on a 4-fight knockout streak. So it's looking as if Bobby is being used as food for an up-and-comer here. This bout also appears to be taking place at a catchweight between the super featherweight and the lightweight limit, but it probably was officially a lightweight bout in regards to rankings and stuff. So things will start out hot in this fight in the opening round. The two men met in the middle and traded shots at a decent pace, both men digging to the body and getting good work in. But later on in that very first round, Antillon would stumble Pacquiao back with a left hook to the body, and Antillon stayed on Bobby with the body attack and dropped him with another big left. Bobby Pacquiao looked in agony and was down for the count. It was a round 1 KO victory for Urbano Antillon. So being stopped in the first round, it was not looking good for Bobby Pacquiao. I know he was cut badly in the Humberto Soto fight, but it was a body blow that was the final blow in that one. And remember, we read that those stoppage losses he suffered early in his career in the Philippines were due to Bobby's weakness to the body. So it would appear as if this weakness to the body had now resurfaced on the world stage. Was this the end for Bobby Pacquiao then? 14 losses at this point, 8 of which are by stoppage, and he was just used as fodder for an undefeated up-and-comer and was stopped in the opening round? Well, at this point, Bobby Pacquiao was still only 27. He was just a kid, and with all those losses on the record, he showed in the past that he could bounce back from them. Once came back from 3 consecutive L's in the Philippines to go on and become the Filipino champion. Came back from a stoppage loss in Thailand in 2005 to then go to America and win a belt, then beat 2 former world champions. But realistically, 8 stoppage losses in, he was a very aged 27-year-old. His 2 wins over former world champs, Carlos Hernandez in 05 and Kevin Kelley in 06, were against aged versions of those guys, and by 2008, Bobby Pacquiao had aged a good bit himself. Since losing that WBC Continental belt, he had not contested for a belt since, and his title hopes now looked very limited with 3 losses in his last 4 fights, a DQ loss and 2 stoppage losses, the second stoppage loss of course coming in the very first round. And as for the round 1 stoppage defeat he suffered to Urbano Antillon, look, a loss is a loss, but I will note that unlike the Soto loss, this loss did not go on to age tremendously, as Antillon did not go on to become a world champion. Funnily enough though, he would go on to challenge for a world title in the form of Humberto Soto's WBC lightweight title, in a losing effort of course, and this first world title shot for Antillon came nearly 3 years after his win over Bobby Pacquiao, so it's not as if Bobby Pacquiao lost to a guy that was on the cusp of a world title shot here. He was an early phase stepping stone here. So yeah, it's not looking great for our guy Bobby. Now, speaking of Bobby Pacquiao not contesting for any form of title since losing that WBC Continental belt back in 2006, well, right after being knocked out in round 1 by Antillon in March of 2008, he would be back fighting in the Philippines in August of 2008, taking on Rirat Sawangwong of Thailand, with the vacant WBO Asia Pacific lightweight title on the line. Well, this opponent would have been known as Deco Bangluai Jim, but BoxRec decided to refer to Thai fighters by their real names, which is rather unproductive for research purposes. Now, there is no footage of this fight on the internet, but Bobby Pacquiao would win this fight by a knockout in the 8th round to become a 3-time title holder. So this was a nice bounce back from the bad run he was on in America. He had picked up another continental title in a new weight class, which was a decent accomplishment. He was a 2-time champ at Super Feather, holding the Filipino title and the WBC Continental Americas title, and now he held the WBO Asian title up at lightweight. So would the 28-year-old Bobby Pacquiao stay in Asia for a bit to defend that belt? Well, Bobby Pacquiao would not defend that Asia Pacific title once, and he would be back in America in November of 2008 to take on Robert Frankel in a 10-round lightweight bout, headlining a show at the HB Pavilion in San Jose. In terms of fighting for titles, This is a funny one because Frankel was the NABA lightweight champion going into the Bobby Pacquiao fight, but the title was not on the line here against Bobby. And Frankel actually fought 3 times since winning the belt, and none of those fights are listed as title defences either. So Frankel was an incredibly active fighter going into this November fight with Pacquiao, mind you. He had already fought 6 times this calendar year. So I guess he was just fighting stay busy fights that the NABA didn't sanction. This fight with Bobby Pacquiao being one of them, which kind of speaks to where Bobby Pacquiao was at this point in his career. Now, I also can't find footage of this Bobby Pacquiao vs Robert Frankel fight anywhere, but I have it on good authority that it wasn't even televised, because I've read 3 different articles about the fight, 2 of which use the term reports indicate when describing what happened in the fight, heavily suggesting that, it wasn't even filmed. So Bobby Pacquiao was relegated to a non-televised bout, after his last 7 fights in America were all on televised shows, a few of which were on the undercard of big world title fights, and a couple of which actually headlined decent shows. In the fight now, Robert Frankel would defeat Bobby Pacquiao by a wide unanimous decision on the cards, with Bobby Pacquiao being deducted a point in the 10th and final round for low blows. So your boy was back at it again with the blows. All 3 judges had it 98-91 to Frankel, which is an 8 rounds to 2 scorecard with the 1 point deduction. I've read that Robert Frankel was pretty much beating Bobby to the punch all fight, but Pacquiao did manage to open up a cut above Frankel's eye in round 6. I've also read that wildcard gym head trainer Freddie Roach was also not in Bobby Pacquiao's corner for this bout. This defeat would downgrade Bobby Pacquiao's record to one of 31 wins, 15 losses and 3 draws, with 4 losses in his last 6 fights. And this left him with a record of 5-4 in the United States of America, with 3 wins by stoppage there, 2 losses by stoppage, and a loss via disqualification over in stateside. And this fight with Robert Frankel would be Bobby Pacquiao's last ever fight. The 28-year-old Bobby Pacquiao would never box again after that defeat. That was it for the career of Manny Pacquiao's little brother. And just over 2 weeks after this Robert Frankel fight, that wound up being Bobby's last ever fight, his 29-year-old older brother Manny Pacquiao defeated the Golden Boy Oscar De La Hoya in a dominant performance to become a real international superstar. Manny Pacquiao was already a highly accomplished 5-weight world champion at that point and did have a level of stardom, but that De La Hoya fight gave him that real superstardom. And because that Manny Pacquiao vs Oscar De La Hoya fight was such a big HBO pay-per-view event, there was loads of hype in the weeks leading up to it. So Manny's little brother Bobby had his last ever fight literally in the background and untelevised, while those HBO 24/7 episodes hyping up Manny's fight with De La Hoya would have been airing. So Bobby Pacquiao kinda faded into obscurity compared to the notoriety that he enjoyed in that 2-year period from mid-2005 to mid-2007, between the Carlos Navarro fight and the Humberto Soto fight. And nothing was made of Bobby Pacquiao's retirement at all. You won't find anything out there about an official retirement or anything. Right after retiring from boxing, Bobby Pacquiao started playing basketball on the Filipino circuit, which it seems as if he was on and off with throughout the years, and he later got into politics like his older brother Manny did. So both Pacquiao brothers have been boxers, basketball players and politicians. Bobby followed in Manny's footsteps with professional boxing and politics, but it would appear as per Wikipedia that Bobby was the one who got into competitive basketball just before Manny, but I'm kinda getting mixed reports. Of course, it would make sense if Bobby did start competitive basketball first due to the premature end to his boxing career, in regards to his age at least. The difference is though, Manny Pacquiao continued boxing and got into pro basketball and politics while he was an active boxer, and Bobby started both of the other endeavours after he finished boxing. Manny Pacquiao does have a more powerful role in politics than Bobby does. We know Manny was the better boxer, and as far as basketball goes, through reading the basketball career section on Bobby's Wikipedia page, it seems like Manny was significantly better at ball as well. So to reflect back on the boxing career of Bobby the Sniper Pacquiao, look, he was a decent pro and it could have been a lot worse. Comparing him to his brother Manny will always highlight Bobby's lack of achievements, as Manny went on to be 8-weight world champion, and Bobby never even as much as challenged for a world title. But Bobby had a winning record at least, and he won a domestic title and 2 different continental titles with 2 of the major governing bodies. Those continental titles aren't spoken of highly when we're talking about the top level of boxing, and by no means do you have to be an elite fighter to hold one. But world title caliber fighters have held these belts, and you are certainly no bum if you grab a hold of one. So again, Bobby will look like a journeyman whenever you compare him to Manny, but there are so many boxers out there with losing records that could never even dream of being capable of holding it down at world level to any extent, which Bobby did do, getting a couple wins on the world stage. There is also the argument that Bobby would have never got the opportunities he did if it wasn't for the name that his brother was building at world level. What domestic level Filipino fighter who took 11 losses over in Asia would get the shot at the WBC Continental Americas title and then get fights against former world champions who are past their prime? The type of fight that is often given to a world level prospect on the cusp of a world title shot. And his brother's name also granted him the opportunity to train at a world class gym with top level trainers and facilities like he could have never done in the Philippines. Look, as true as all that may be now, he still did the work. The Pacquiao name didn't magically give him the ability to stop Kevin Kelley with that rib shot, nor did it magically give him the heart and grit to go 10 hard rounds with Carlos Hernandez. So not to overuse this term, but again, it could have been worse. Although Bobby did eventually go on a bad run in the States and sort of fade into obscurity, he could have got battered right away on his American TV debut against Carlos Navarro and looked like a bum. And everyone would have been like, why even bring this guy over to the States just because he's Manny Pacquiao's brother? He's clearly just a bum. But he did make it past Carlos Navarro, then went on to defeat Carlos Hernandez, then defeated Kevin Kelley. In regards to Bobby Pacquiao's fighting style, it was similar to Manny's in that he was a southpaw with an exciting style, throwing punches in bunches, darting in and out of range, and relying quite a bit on athleticism. Except he didn't quite have the same traits as Manny did in the way of power, speed, and punch resistance. Bobby also had that propensity to go low with the shots, was a bit of a dirty fighter, nothing too malicious from him I don't think. He seemed to like to go to the body a lot and just couldn't help himself in terms of keeping the punches up, hence why he got DQ'd against Velazquez for the blows. He wasn't meticulously going low on the referee's blind side to try and cheat his way to victory. He clearly just had no discipline in the way of keeping his punches up. And as for Bobby not being the most refined boxer, remember, he literally had no amateur fights, as opposed to his brother Manny who had 64 amateur bouts. Bobby went pro as soon as he started boxing at 17 years old, so that's a big reason for him being a win some and lose some fighter back in the Philippines. He literally made his pro debut the day after his 17th birthday, and took 6 professional losses before he even turned 20 years old. So there are pros and cons to Bobby being known as merely the brother of Manny Pacquiao. The pro being that his brother's fame was probably most of the reason why he got the opportunities that he did in boxing. Not even just in the States like we spoke about, but he might have been given more opportunities on the domestic level in the Philippines because his brother was making his name on the world stage. And the con is that Bobby is held to a way higher level of scrutiny than any other boxer of his level would. A fighter who is a fringe contender with a bunch of losses who's contesting for regional belts. It's not normal to pick out a fighter of that ilk and just completely crap on their career. But we do so in the case of Bobby Pacquiao, as we mainly speak about him in the vein of comparing him to his first ballot Hall of Fame level brother Manny Pacquiao. Some people do go a bit far with it though. I read a really trashy article on Bleacher Report that pretty much assumed Bobby's envy of Manny due to his less successful career, with no real basis to it. I didn't like the tone of that one at all. But in my humbled opinion, the pro of getting great financial opportunities fighting in America due to your brother's name much outweighs the con of a bunch of people calling you a rubbish box compared to your brother. So I'm not here to cry on Bobby's behalf and demand that he gets more respect or anything like that. I just think a certain level of disrespect is unnecessary. Maybe some critics are comfortable being rather insulting in their criticisms of Bobby Pacquiao because they are cognizant of the fact that his brother's name got him the opportunities that were far beyond what he would have got otherwise, but I don't think some people even think that deeply about it. I think some of them are just being negative for the sake of it. Now, it does seem like there might have been a bit of a rift between Bobby Pacquiao and Manny Pacquiao, or at least between Bobby and Manny's team at one point, because when we were looking through the fights, we got to a point at the Fernando Trejo fight when Manny's trainer Freddie Roach stopped being in Bobby's corner completely, and Roach remained to be absent for Bobby's last 4 fights, and Manny probably became absent too. After missing weight for the Velazquez fight, Bobby Pacquiao blamed Freddie Roach's focus on training Manny Pacquiao for the Morales Trilogy fight as the reason for his weight miss. Bobby didn't get the proper training he believed he was entitled to, so he wanted to look for a new team, so there must have been a bit of resentment there. But after the Velazquez fight, Bobby would still be cornered by Freddie Roach for his next fight against Humberto Soto, and despite not being cornered by Roach again after the Soto fight, Bobby still trained in the wildcard gym after the Soto fight. As far as the limited information out there goes, I'm going to make the educated guess that Manny prompted Bobby to stay with his camp after the weight miss ordeal. So yeah, there's no real evidence out there that there was any real major tensions between the Pacquiao brothers. Freddie Roach and Manny Pacquiao are not obliged to be there for Bobby while focusing on the world-class career of Manny, and we have no grounds to assume that Bobby felt any level of entitlement to their help beyond the little situation with the Hector Velazquez fight, that they clearly moved on from immediately. As much as I have compared Bobby Pacquiao to Manny Pacquiao throughout this video, I did limit comparisons to an extent when going through Bobby's fights in America, because my intention in producing this video wasn't to compare Bobby's career to Manny's and either talk about how good or bad a boxer Bobby Pacquiao was. I'm also wanted to delve into some obscure boxing trivia in the form of the short but eventful and colourful stint that Bobby Pacquiao had boxing on American TV. A lot of people probably don't even know that Manny Pacquiao has a brother who boxed, and most of those who do probably just know Bobby for that whole "I'm not a blow thing." But there was a bunch of other interesting little things that happened in Bobby Pacquiao's fights over in the States. The Navarro fight was just mental to watch, not in the way of being a crazy good fight, but in the way of being very eventful. The Carlos Hernandez fight was just a sick fight with good moments in it, boxing wise. The Kevin Kelley fight was an interesting one. The Hector Velazquez fight, whatever happened there. The Soto fight, there was the weird knockdown in round 1 and the cut that Bobby suffered. The Trejo fight ended in a weird way. And the Antillon fight was a run-round brawl that Bobby got stopped in. I'm all for that obscure boxing trivia, man. To find out that Manny had a fighting brother is one thing, if you didn't know already. Then to find out that he had these weird fights is just a whole nother level of excitement for us little bored nerds who don't leave the house. So, you can say that Bobby Pacquiao was a bad fighter who only got opportunities because of his brother. You can also say that he was a dirty fighter. But one thing you most certainly can't say is that his little run in America was boring. Now, the major difference between Bobby Pacquiao and Manny Pacquiao is that Bobby had his last fight at the age of 28. And Manny Pacquiao had his last professional fight to date at the age of 42, back in 2021. So Manny fought on way longer. But Manny Pacquiao is now of course returning to the ring. As of this recording, he is set to fight Mario Barrios for the WBC welterweight title on July 19th at the ripe old age of 46. A video like this about Bobby Pacquiao is the kind of video I would have done anyway, but seeing as the Pacquiao name is all over the news at this current juncture, I thought I might as well bang this one out now. I'm not going to be going crazy on Pacquiao related content between now and the Pacquiao Barrios fight, but there is one video that I'm looking to do about Manny Pacquiao before the fight, so please do subscribe if you haven't already to stay tuned for that one. Thank you for making it to this point in the video. I hope you guys enjoyed hearing about the career of Bobby Pacquiao and learned a thing or two above all, and you have been listening to O.M.E. Boxing.